Welcome, listeners, to another enlightening episode of The Way of Hermes. I'm Jake, and joining me today is my co-host, Emily. We're diving into a fascinating topic that many of our listeners have been curious about, the practical challenges of progressing in Hermeticism.
That's right, Jake. Hermeticism, with its rich tapestry of mystical teachings and philosophical insights, has captivated seekers for centuries. But in our modern world, practitioners often face a unique predicament: the lack of a clear practical system for progress.
It's quite different from more structured mystical systems like Freemasonry or Sufism, isn't it? Those traditions offer clear roadmaps for their adherents, but Hermeticism, well, it's a bit more complex.
Indeed it is, Jake. For beginners especially, the vastness of Hermetic practice can be overwhelming. From ceremonial magic to alchemy, from astrological studies to philosophical contemplation, there's so much to explore, but often no clear starting point.
I can imagine that leaves many aspiring Hermeticists feeling a bit lost. But there's a flip side to this, isn't there? This lack of a standardized system also offers a unique opportunity.
Absolutely. It opens the door for personal exploration and individualized approaches. Hermeticism encourages practitioners to delve into their own experiences, to experiment, and to seek personal revelations. It's liberating, but it also requires a great deal of discipline and self-reflection.
That's a crucial point, Emily. Without a defined structure, the role of guidance and community becomes even more important. Seeking out knowledgeable guides and engaging with like-minded individuals can provide invaluable support and direction.
And for our listeners who might be feeling a bit adrift in their Hermetic studies, it might be helpful to look at how other traditions structure their progress. Take Freemasonry, for instance. Jake, could you give us a quick overview of how Freemasons approach progression?
Certainly. Freemasonry offers a structured system where members start as apprentices and progress through various degrees. Each level brings new knowledge, wisdom, and practical skills. It's a journey of self-improvement and moral development with clear milestones along the way.
That's fascinating, and Sufism has a similar approach, doesn't it? A well-defined path of spiritual purification?
Sufis follow a disciplined path aimed at attaining direct experiential knowledge of the divine. They progress through various stages, evolving from students to teachers in a systematic manner.
These examples offer some great inspiration for Hermeticists looking to create structure in their practice. We could think of a Hermetic journey in similar stages, perhaps beginning with learning foundational principles and ethical teachings, then progressing to deeper philosophical study and practical applications like alchemy or theurgy, and finally reaching advanced stages of divine connection and inner awareness.
That's a great way to frame it, Emily. And speaking of progression, many spiritual traditions incorporate tests and challenges as milestones. These often involve symbolic acts that demonstrate the practitioner's commitment and readiness to advance.
While Hermeticism doesn't have standardized tests, practitioners can certainly incorporate self-imposed challenges into their journey. It's a way to mark progress and deepen commitment.
I love that idea. It really puts the responsibility for growth in the hands of the practitioner. Do you have any examples of how someone might structure their progress or create these self-imposed tests in a Hermetic context?
Great question. One approach could be creating knowledge acquisition levels. A practitioner could divide Hermetic teachings into stages, setting goals for mastering each level. Our online course actually offers a structure like this for those who are interested.
That's a fantastic resource for our listeners. What about more personal, reflective practices?
Regular self-assessment through practices like journaling or meditation can be incredibly valuable. It allows practitioners to reflect on their experiences, identify areas for growth, and set new goals.
And let's not forget the importance of putting principles into practice. Acts of service and sharing knowledge could be powerful ways to embody Hermetic teachings and mark progress.
Definitely, Jake. It's about turning the way of Hermes into a practical way of life. Speaking of which, many of our listeners might be wondering about moral and ethical progression in Hermeticism. It's not as straightforward as following a list of commandments, is it?
You're right, it's not. Hermeticism doesn't provide a clear-cut moral code like some other traditions, but we can glean ethical guidelines from the Hermetic texts. For instance, the Corpus Hermeticum offers insights into behaviors and their effects.
That's true. The texts discuss concepts like the 7 planetary energies and the 12 irrational tormentors of matter. These can serve as a foundation for ethical behavior and personal growth.
And there's a beautiful simplicity in the Hermetic approach to ethics, summed up in Corpus Hermeticum 12:23. There is but one religion of God, and that is not to be evil.
I love that quote, Jake. It really distills the essence of Hermetic ethics, being reverent, considerate, and mindful. These qualities lead to the good, and thus to God.
Exactly. Now, Emily, there's another challenge in modern Hermetic practice that we should address: the lack of living teachers. How do you think this impacts practitioners today?
That's a crucial point, Jake. Without living teachers to guide us, modern Hermeticists often rely on the texts themselves as their primary source of wisdom. Hermes Trismegistus becomes a mythical teacher through these ancient writings.
And it's worth noting that these texts are actually the work of multiple authors over time. So in a way, we have many guides, but they're all from the distant past. This can make it challenging to get practical, real-time guidance.
That's true. It's one thing to read and interpret a text, but quite another to have a living teacher who can clarify, answer questions, and provide context. So what would you recommend for modern practitioners facing this challenge?
Great question. One approach is to form study groups or discussion circles with other Hermeticists. This allows for collective interpretation and shared insights. It's not quite the same as having a living teacher, but it can help clarify difficult concepts and prevent misunderstandings.
It reminds me of the saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Sometimes that teacher might be a peer who has a different perspective or has grappled with the same questions.
And let's not forget the power of practical application. As you work with Hermetic principles in your daily life, you gain insights that no text alone can provide. This experiential learning becomes a kind of inner teacher.
That's a profound point. It's about turning Hermeticism into a lived philosophy rather than just an intellectual exercise. Listeners, we encourage you to find ways to apply these teachings in your own lives and share your experiences with others on the same path.
Absolutely. And remember, the lack of a standardized system or living teachers in Hermeticism can be seen as both a challenge and an opportunity. It requires more personal responsibility and active engagement, but it also allows for a deeply personalized spiritual journey.
Well said, Jake. It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? The freedom to explore and interpret can be both liberating and daunting. It requires discipline, discernment, and a commitment to self-reflection.
Indeed it does. And speaking of self-reflection, Emily, I think it's worth discussing how Hermeticists can gauge their own progress without external benchmarks. What are your thoughts on this?
Without external benchmarks, self-assessment becomes crucial. One approach could be to regularly reflect on how your understanding of Hermetic principles has deepened over time. Are you finding new layers of meaning in texts you've read before? Are you able to draw connections between different Hermetic concepts more easily?
Those are great indicators, Emily. I'd also add that observing changes in your daily life and interactions could be a powerful gauge. Are you finding yourself more mindful, more attuned to the interconnectedness of things? Are you better able to maintain equanimity in challenging situations?
Absolutely, Jake. Personal transformation is at the heart of Hermetic practice. Another aspect to consider is the development of intuition or gnosis. As practitioners progress, they often report experiencing moments of profound insight or direct spiritual knowledge. These experiences, while subjective, can be significant markers of growth.
Hermeticism isn't just about accumulating knowledge. It's about applying that wisdom in practical ways. Listeners, you might want to keep a journal to track these kinds of practical applications and insights. It can be a valuable tool for self-assessment.
Great suggestion, Jake. Another aspect of progress in Hermeticism is the development of a more holistic worldview. As practitioners advance, They often report a growing sense of unity with the cosmos and a deeper understanding of their place within it. How do you think this manifests in everyday life?
I believe it often shows up as increased empathy and compassion. As we recognize the interconnectedness of all things, we naturally become more considerate of others and our environment. It's like the boundaries between self and other start to blur.
Beautifully put, Jake. This reminds me of the Hermetic concept of the all, the idea that everything is part of one universal mind or consciousness. As practitioners progress, they might find themselves naturally aligning more with this principle in their thoughts and actions.
And this brings us to an important point about Hermetic progress. It's not just about personal advancement, but about how that growth contributes to the greater good. How do you think Hermeticists can balance personal development with service to others?
In Hermeticism, personal growth and service to others are often seen as two sides of the same coin. As we develop our understanding and connection to the all, we naturally feel compelled to share that wisdom and help others on their journey.
But let's dive a bit deeper into practical ways Hermeticists can structure their progress. What about the concept of knowledge acquisition levels we mentioned earlier?
Creating a structured system of knowledge acquisition can be incredibly helpful. For instance, a beginner might focus on learning the foundational principles and ethical teachings of Hermeticism. This could involve studying key texts like the Corpus Hermeticum and practicing basic meditation techniques.
And as they progress to an intermediate level, they might delve deeper into the philosophical aspects and start applying Hermetic principles in their daily lives, right? Perhaps even exploring practices like alchemy or theurgy if they're drawn to those areas.
And at more advanced levels, practitioners might focus on deepening their connection with the divine and increasing their inner awareness. This could involve more complex meditative practices, advanced study of esoteric texts, and perhaps even teaching or mentoring others.
That's a great framework, Emily. It gives practitioners a sense of direction while still allowing for personal exploration. Now, we've talked about the lack of standardized tests in Hermeticism. How do you think practitioners can create meaningful challenges for themselves to mark their progress?
That's where creativity comes in, Jake. One approach could be setting personal goals related to the application of Hermetic principles. For example, a practitioner might challenge themselves to maintain equanimity in the face of a difficult situation, or to practice mindfulness for a certain period each day.
Another idea might be to undertake a specific project or study that pushes the boundaries of their current understanding. For instance, writing an in-depth analysis of a complex Hermetic text, or creating a piece of art that expresses Hermetic principles.
And let's not forget the importance of self-reflection in this process. Regular journaling or meditation sessions focused on examining one's progress can be invaluable. It allows practitioners to track their growth and identify areas that need more attention.
That's a crucial point, Emily. Self-reflection is key in any spiritual practice, but perhaps even more so in Hermeticism, given its emphasis on personal revelation and understanding. Now, we've touched on the ethical aspects of Hermeticism earlier, but could you elaborate on how practitioners might approach moral and ethical progression?
While Hermeticism doesn't provide a rigid moral code, it does offer guidance through concepts like the 7 planetary energies or the 12 irrational tormentors of matter. Practitioners could focus on understanding and embodying the positive aspects of these energies while working to overcome the negative influences.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hermetic Dialogues, the official podcast of the Way of Hermes website. If you are interested in free articles on Hermeticism and related topics or want to study this ancient tradition through our online course, be sure to visit our website at wayofhermes.com.